Before the night was over, he would tell me, "Tomorrow, you're no longer part of this family." The words came to me before the night had even begun to unravel, before anyone raised a voice or spilled a drink. They hung there, quiet and precise, the way certain truths do when they are meant to land cleanly. I remember thinking, not for the first time in my life, that endings rarely announce themselves with drama. Sometimes they arrive dressed as celebrations. The story you are about to hear is a work of fiction created by the Her Chains channel team based on real-life situations to convey lessons about family, emotions, and human values. All characters and events are illustrative. My name is Marion Holloway. I stood near the edge of the reception hall, close enough to be included, far enough to be unnecessary. That had become my position lately. The wedding was everything people in Charleston admire: polished, orderly, admired from every angle. Guests leaned in to compliment the timing, the music, the way everything seemed to move without friction. I nodded when they spoke to me. I smiled when expected. Evan moved through the room with the confidence of someone who believed he belonged at the center of it. He did not bark instructions or draw attention. He adjusted, redirected, decided. A hand on a shoulder here, a quiet word there. People shifted without realizing they had been guided. Even my daughter followed his lead, her attention flicking to him before each small choice. I had already taken care of what came after the wedding, the practical things, the financial safety net no one notices until it disappears. It felt strange to have done all that work and realize how invisible it had become. When Evan passed near me, his expression was pleasant, composed. Nothing about him suggested conflict. And yet, standing there with my hands folded and my voice unused, I felt something tighten. Not fear, recognition. This was a perfect day. Everyone agreed. I just hadn't realized how perfectly I had been placed to the side. Evan never corrected anyone outright. He didn't have to. When the seating chart stalled near the entrance, he stepped in beside the coordinator, his tone easy. "Let's shift the Holloways closer to the aisle," he offered. "Already moving name cards. It'll help with the flow." People nodded, relieved to have a solution. My chair moved 2 places down. No one looked back. At the bar, my daughter reached for a glass of champagne. Evan's hand brushed her wrist. Light and brief. "Later," he murmured, smiling. She smiled back and set the glass down. The exchange passed as affection. I felt it register as permission. During dinner, my sister leaned toward my daughter. "Your mother should give the toast," she suggested. Evan leaned in first. Voice low. "We've got the timeline tight," he replied. "Let's keep it simple." My daughter nodded before my sister finished her sentence. I caught Evan's eye once. He held it just long enough to acknowledge me, then turned away, already engaged in another quiet adjustment. He never spoke over anyone. He never contradicted. He framed every decision as efficiency, as kindness, as keeping things smooth. "You're doing great." I heard him tell my daughter as the band reset. "Just stay with me." "I am," she answered, without hesitation. I'd raised her to think for herself. I watched her now, attentive, agreeable, waiting for cues she used to give herself. Later, when the photographer asked for family near the dance floor, Evan stepped forward again. "Let's get the bride settled first," he suggested. "We'll circle back." We didn't. No voices were raised. No lines were crossed loudly. And yet, by the time the first dance ended, the shape of the evening had been decided: who stood close, who waited, who no longer needed to be consulted. It happened between courses. During the small pocket of time when everyone relaxed and assumed the hard parts were over, Evan stepped close as I reached for my water. He didn't block my way or touch my arm. He positioned himself so that anyone looking would see a son-in-law checking in on his wife's mother. His voice stayed calm, almost courteous. "Starting tomorrow, Things will change. You won't be part of our family structure anymore. The words were measured, delivered like a logistical note. No heat, no hesitation. I turned slightly, enough to see his face. He watched me the way people do when they expect gratitude for honesty. Behind him, one of the bridesmaids paused mid-laugh. A man at the next table stopped lifting his fork. No one spoke, but the air shifted. Conversations thinned out, then resumed too loudly, as if volume could patch over what had just slipped through. I drew a slow breath. That's quite a thing to announce at a wedding. He smiled, small and confident. I prefer clarity. It avoids confusion later. Does my daughter share this preference? She trusts me to handle transitions. He replied, this is one of them. I felt the weight of the room pressing inward, the unspoken awareness that something had cracked but not shattered. Evan straightened, already disengaging. Certain the exchange was finished, he moved toward my daughter, slipped an arm around her waist, and whispered something that made her laugh. The bridesmaid glanced at me, then away. The man with the fork lowered his hand and stared at his plate. I stood there long enough to understand what he'd done. This wasn't anger or impulse. It was placement. A line drawn while witnesses hovered just close enough to register discomfort, not close enough to intervene. I could have raised my voice. I could have demanded an explanation in front of everyone who mattered to him. The thought passed quickly, fully formed, and just as quickly dissolved. Across the room, my daughter leaned into him, relaxed and unguarded. She looked happy, protected. I folded my hands, steadying them against my glass. Evan had made his declaration in the safest way possible for himself. And if I answered him now, on his terms, I understood exactly what it would cost. I stayed where I was after Evan walked away, long enough for my pulse to settle. I'd learned years ago that the first reaction is rarely the one you can live with. My daughter caught my eye from across the room and lifted her glass. I returned the gesture. It was small, ordinary, the kind of exchange we'd shared since she was a child, and I was learning how to be both parents at once. I remembered her at 6, gripping my hand on her first day of school. "Don't leave yet," she'd whispered. I'd stayed until the bell rang, smiling through my own fear, teaching her that stability doesn't require noise. It requires presence. "Mom, are you okay?" my sister murmured when she reached my side. "I'm fine," I replied. My voice held. That mattered. She studied my face. "You look pale." "It's been a long day." I let the explanation end there. Anything more would have turned into a scene Evan would later frame as proof. I understood the cost of speaking up right then. Public confrontation would place my daughter between us before she had any reason to doubt him. It would give Evan exactly what he wanted, a story where I became the disruption. I watched my daughter laugh at something he whispered, her shoulders easing as she leaned into him. Whatever I chose next had to protect her, not my pride, so I adjusted my posture, finished my water, and returned a few polite smiles. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, a line had been drawn. Silence wasn't surrender. It was timing. By the time the band began the next song, I'd already made a quieter decision, one that didn't require witnesses, raised voices, or permission. I didn't go looking for drama. I went looking for quiet. I stepped into the hallway and took out my phone, turning my back to the reception before anyone could ask if I needed anything. The transfer, the one we'd discussed as temporary support, had been scheduled weeks ago, earmarked for stability, framed as help, treated as inevitable. My sister's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring once, then answered. "Are you stepping out?" she asked, keeping her voice low. "I'm handling something," I replied. "Do you want me with you?" "No. I need this to be mine." I opened the banking app. The pending transactions sat there, neat and confident, like it had already earned its place. I tapped into the details, read the note I'd written months earlier, then erased it. My thumb hovered, not from doubt, from clarity. Behind me, the music swelled. Applause rose and fell. The party continued without noticing what was about to change. I confirmed the cancellation. The screen refreshed. The transfer disappeared. A server passed by and smiled. "Everything all right?" "Yes," I told her. And for the first time that night, it was true. I returned my phone to my purse and straightened my jacket. When I re-entered the room, no one reacted. Evan stood near my daughter, laughing with a guest. He looked comfortable, secure. I didn't interrupt. I didn't announce anything. I moved to our table, collected my clutch, and nodded to a few familiar faces. My sister watched me, reading my expression, then gave a small, steadying nod of her own. At the door, my daughter called my name. I turned. She smiled, distracted, radiant. I smiled back, the same way I had earlier, careful not to burden her with a shift she didn't yet need to understand. I left the reception without explanation, carrying nothing visible with me. The money was already gone. The call came before sunrise. After the bank notifications would have landed, I recognized Evan's number and let it ring twice before answering. "Marion," he began, voice measured, almost warm. "I'm glad you picked up. I'm listening," I replied. "I wanted to clear the air," he continued. "Last night got misunderstood. Weddings are stressful. Things come out wrong. Some things come out exactly as intended." I said. He paused, then adjusted. "I think we both want the same thing. Stability, harmony. There's no reason for tension between family." "You introduced the tension," I answered. "I just noticed it." "That's not fair," he replied quickly. "You know how much pressure we're under. Starting a marriage isn't simple. We need everyone aligned with what I asked, with moving forward," he said, "with letting go of old roles. Transitions can be hard, especially for parents." I pictured him pacing, choosing words the way he chose seating charts. "You told me I wasn't part of the family anymore. That wasn't what I meant," he replied. "You took it personally. I took it literally." Another pause. He softened his tone. "Let's not let one awkward moment define anything. We can reset." "I'd like that. I'm sure you would." "Marion," he said, slower now. "We're all adults. We can handle this maturely." "I am," I replied. He exhaled, the sound tight. "Then you understand how important support is right now. Financial stress can damage a marriage before it starts." "I understand stress," I said. "I also understand boundaries." "That money was planned." He pressed. "We counted on it. You assumed it." I answered. Silence stretched between us, heavier this time. When he spoke again, the patience was thinner. "I'm trying to be reasonable." "So am I." The call ended without agreement, without raised voices, without resolution. I set my phone down and sat still for a moment, aware of how quickly concern had turned into expectation. The apology hadn't been about words. It had been about access. He arrived early. The kind of early meant to catch people unguarded. The knock came sharp and insistent. I opened the door to Evan standing too close, jaw set, posture rigid in a way I hadn't seen the night before. My daughter was behind him on the walkway, her face tight with worry. "We need to talk," he began, stepping forward as if the decision had already been made. "This isn't a good time," I replied, holding my ground in the doorway. He smiled without warmth. "It's the only time you've left me." My daughter looked between us. "Mom, please, can we just sit down?" "We can," I told her. If everyone remembers where they are, Evan's patience thinned. This doesn't have to be difficult. You're making it difficult. I'm making it clear. He moved his hand toward the doorframe, then stopped himself. You're jeopardizing our start. You know what that money was for? I know exactly what it was for. I answered. And I know why you're here. His voice rose. You don't get to punish us because of one poorly worded moment. That moment was yours, I said. So are its consequences. My daughter stepped closer. Evan, lower your voice. He turned to her, incredulous. I'm trying to fix this. You're trying to force it, she replied. He laughed, sharp and brittle. Force, I'm asking for cooperation. Cooperation isn't demanded on someone else's porch. I told him. He exhaled hard. You think you're protecting her. You're undermining us. Marriage needs unity. Unity doesn't start with erasure, I said. He looked at me then, really looked. And something slipped. You had your turn. This is our life now. My daughter flinched. That's not what you promised. I promised stability. He snapped. And stability costs money. The words hung there, bare and unmistakable. I watched my daughter's expression change, not all at once, but enough. She saw the edge he usually kept sheathed. She heard the part of him that hadn't been meant for her ears. I stepped back and opened the door wider. You're done here. He stared, stunned by the refusal. You can't shut me out. I already did, I replied. He hesitated, then turned away, anger pulsing through his shoulders. My daughter stayed, her breath uneven. I didn't know. She whispered. You do now, I said. She nodded once, as if steadying herself, and followed him down the steps without looking back. After they left, my phone stayed quiet. That told me more than any apology could have. My sister called mid-morning. He came to your house. She noted, not asking. Yes, and your daughter heard him. She did. There was a pause. Then it's starting to make sense. It made sense to me, too, not as isolated moments, but as a sequence I could finally lay end to end. The money always came up wrapped in reassurance. Stability, planning, responsibility. Every conversation circled back to what things cost and who should control them. When my daughter stopped calling me as often, he'd framed it as independence. She needs space to build her own life, he'd told me once, smiling like he was doing me a favor. When holidays shifted away from our family, it was about simplicity. When decisions happened without discussion, it was protection. I replayed his words from the porch. Stability costs money. Not partnership. Not trust. Money. I thought of how easily he'd redirected her, how naturally she'd deferred. None of it had looked like force. It looked like care. It sounded like confidence. That was the most unsettling part. My sister exhaled softly. This didn't start last night. No, I agreed. It just stopped hiding. I set my phone down and stood there for a long moment, letting the clarity settle. Whatever came next would require patience. Not silence this time, but steadiness. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was seeing. My daughter came back that evening alone. She stood in my kitchen, keys still in her hand, shoulders tight like she was bracing for impact. He wants to talk. She told me. All of us. Tonight. He already talked. I replied. Now he wants control. She didn't argue. That alone felt different. Evan arrived an hour later, composed again. The way he reset himself when he thought emotion had gone too far. He didn't sit. He stayed standing, as if distance would give him leverage. This has gone far enough, he began. We need to be practical. My daughter crossed her arms. Then be honest. He glanced at her, surprised by the tone. I am being honest. Your mother is overreacting. I'm right here, I told him. He nodded once. Then patience. You've always been involved. That's not sustainable. Involved. I repeated. or present. He ignored me. Marriage requires independence. Financial independence, emotional independence. And yet, my daughter cut in. You keep talking about her money. His jaw tightened. Because it matters. Starting a life without stability is irresponsible. Stability, I said, or access. He turned to me then, frustration stripping the polish away. You had your years of influence. You raised her. You did your part. This is ours now. My daughter stepped forward. You don't get to dismiss her like that. I'm not dismissing her, he replied. I'm setting boundaries. Boundaries don't include erasing people. She shot back. He exhaled sharply. You're being emotional. I'm being attentive. She said, there's a difference. He looked between us, recalibrating. Let's be clear, that money was meant to help us. You offered it. I offered support. I answered, not obedience. He scoffed. Without that money, everything gets harder. For you, my daughter said quietly. The room went still. Evan laughed once, short and humorless. Of course, for me, I'm responsible for keeping things together. By controlling them, she replied. You don't understand how the world works. He snapped. Someone has to steer. I used to think that was you, she said. Now I see you just didn't want anyone else touching the wheel. He stared at her. The calculation failing this time. You're choosing her over us. I'm choosing reality. She said, you told her she didn't belong. You showed up at her house. You talked about her money like it was already yours. He turned to me, voice rising. You poisoned her against me. I stayed quiet. I replied, you did the rest. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was clean. Evan looked at my daughter, waiting for rescue that didn't come. She shook her head once. I heard enough. He left without another word. The door closed behind him. Final and unceremonious. My daughter sank into the chair across from me, her breath uneven. I didn't know. She whispered, you do now, I told her. She nodded, wiping her face with the heel of her hand. The truth had arrived without drama, spoken plainly at last, and there was no place left for it to hide. The house felt quieter after Evan left, not emptier. My daughter stayed. She made tea without asking, hands steadier than they'd been the night before. I'm not ready to apologize for him. She told me, but I'm done covering for him. That's enough for today, I replied. We talked through practical things. The money would remain untouched. Not as punishment. Not as leverage. As a boundary. She nodded, accepting it without bargaining. That mattered more than any promise. He keeps texting, she admitted, glancing at her phone. I told him I need space, real space. Keep it. I said, you don't owe explanations for protecting yourself. She looked up then, eyes clearer. I want you at the table, she told me. Not on the edges. Not as a favor. I never wanted a favor. I answered, just a place. That night, I learned something I wish I'd known earlier. Love doesn't require shrinking. Support doesn't mean surrender. And boundaries aren't walls. They're lines that tell people how to treat you. If this story resonated with you, tap like, leave a comment, or subscribe to hear more stories about family, boundaries, and finding your footing when it matters most. My daughter set an extra plate on the table and pulled out the chair across from hers. I sat, not because I paid for the seat, but because I refused to disappear.